stand by.
Yeah.
Oh, she's got it. Okay. Yeah, the person was able to get in, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ready to start?
Yeah. Go for it.
All right. Let's go. Well, welcome to the monthly Green Living program. Thanks for joining us. Planning this program has been very difficult and challenging because stuff is such a huge issue, like an octopus with tentacles going every which way. So we have selected some issues that we want to share with you and present. We've all learned a lot and we're eager to share it with you. The inspiration for this workshop was the Story of Stuff movement that Annie Leonard started back in 2007. She was with Greenpeace for 10 years, traveling the world. They were doing research on how stuff was made all around the world, in developing countries and just everywhere, how it was made, how it was used, and how it was disposed of. And they documented it. And so in 2008, she put all the research down into the Story of Stuff, and it went viral and really started a movement, started the Story of Stuff project, and it's still ongoing today. And so you can tune in, go to Story of Stuff, and you can watch some of the fascinating videos that they've done on story of cosmetics, story of bottled water, story of plastic. There's short videos that are animated and easy to understand, and they put their findings into words. So that was our inspiration. The findings she had were shocking. If the world used as much stuff as the United States uses, we would need 3 to 5 Earths, and we only have one. So we need to address our love of stuff and our use of stuff and our disposal of stuff in a big way. We're going to jump on into the program. We're on a tight time frame. So we're going to start, I'll give you a quick snapshot of it. We're going to start with insights from Ed on nature, and are we part of it or apart from it? And that leads right into Katie telling us about the circular economy, because nature does have a circular economy. And without the circular economy, none of this, nothing could happen. We need to understand that and follow those guidelines. So she's going to give us an overview of that. And there's so many great videos out there that we've zeroed in on 2 clips that are going to explain visually, will shed the light on a couple of issues with plastic and e-waste, some major issues we have facing us. And I think it's a real eye-opener to see these videos. Linda's going to introduce a little bit about environmental justice and how our stuff is really impacting developing nations as well as marginalized communities in our own country with our stuff and what we're doing with it. And then Sabina will end up with some local issues and solutions that are going on, and followed by our commitments, like we always do at the end of the programs. We have personal commitment thoughts for you to jump in and try. So we will end up with that. So let's just jump in and start with Ed and his insights for us to set the stage for our program.
Great, thanks very much, Diane, for that great introduction and for bringing this whole concept, this project of Story of Stuff to the Green Sanctuary team. I'd like to set the stage by, next slide, please, Dan. Thank you. I'd like to set the stage by asking a very simple two-part question to help us think about our place in the natural world. First part, are you a part of nature? Do you live your life as part of nature? Next slide, please, Dan. Or do you live apart from nature? Are you part of nature, or are you apart, living apart from nature? And what do I mean by that? Next slide, please, Dan. So this is a first principle, and perhaps perhaps the most important principle in the natural world, is that all matter in nature is recycled and reused. There are no exceptions. There are no single uses in nature. And you only have to walk through a forest to get a very vivid reminder of that. You will see all around you on standing dead trees and trees that fall into the ground, logs and branches, you will see decomposer fungi of all shapes and colors and sizes. I've taken all of these pictures here in Connecticut and in New England. Just a fascinating array. All of these beautiful fungi serve the critical role of decomposing dead biomass and breaking it down and returning all of those components, those nutrients, to the soil so that they can be reused, recycled by the next generation of plants. Next slide, please, Dan. And the best example that I could think of to highlight this point of nature's, the importance of cycles in nature's, is the coupling of the two critical processes of photosynthesis and respiration. The idea is that the outputs from one of those systems becomes the inputs for the other. What I mean by that is that green plants, in the presence of sunlight, produce the outputs, or rather they use carbon dioxide and water. They take those in and they produce the outputs of oxygen and glucose. And all living things, animals and green plants as well, take those outputs from photosynthesis and they produce energy for life. And the outputs they produce, they become carbon dioxide and water, which are then the inputs for photosynthesis, and the cycle goes round and round and round. The two systems are coupled. Nothing is single use, everything is reused. And that's how nature works. And that's how nature has worked for literally billions of years. Cycles are a critical part of nature. And we humans, we've ignored this first principle, and we ignore it at our peril, and I'd add with great hubris and great arrogance, that we've forgotten and have gone against this great principle. Next slide, please, Dan. So in this workshop, we're going to give you lots of ways that we all can live our lives more naturally. That is, more as a part of nature and not apart from nature. And here's a really important point. We are not helpless victims in this single-use economy. We all have agency, and we all can make positive changes. And that's what you're going to learn from this workshop, and hopefully we'll all adopt and become more part of nature. Okay, next slide, Dan. I think I pass it on from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. So I'm going to take it from there. I'm going to talk a little bit about transitioning from nature to our economic systems a little bit. So we're going to go from biology class to economics class. But they're really so linked, and they really don't need to be so different. Traditionally, we have thought about our economy, the way that we get and use stuff, as being a linear economy. This is not the way natural systems work, right? We participate, our existing economy operates linearly with an emphasis on continuous consumption and continuous growth, without returning any of that matter, without returning any of that energy back into the system in a sustaining manner, the way that natural systems do. The way we're currently operating, we're consuming our resources, extracting them, from the earth, and we're using them up, and then we dump them back out into our water, our air, back on our land, and treating our planet as our sewer, as a waste dump. And in a linear system, it's not sustainable. It's not continuous, right? It will reach capacity, and we're getting to that point. Next slide, please. So as I said, this take, make, waste linear economy. That's one way to think about it. We take from the earth, we make a bunch of stuff, and then we throw it away. It has limits, and we're reaching those limits. Linking it with our current climate crisis, we have shown that through the UN International Resource Panel has estimated that 62%, so almost about 2/3 of global greenhouse emissions, come from the first two arrows here, from the take and the make, right? From the extraction, processing, manufacturing of goods to serve our society's needs. About a third, a little over a third, 38%, are emitted into the delivery, the use, and then the disposal of those services, sort of the use and the waste part. And so a lot of our focus for tackling climate change has been on that using side of things. How do we use our energy? How can we be more efficient? But if we're really going to tackle climate change, we have to look at the take and the make part of it as well. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. If we continue on with business as usual, we have tripled our use of consumption since 1970. And if we continue on doing the way we've been doing, by 2050, we're going to double it again. And like I keep saying, not sustainable. Next slide. So this is a short little video from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that introduces the idea of circular economy and links it to climate change and what we're going to need to do in order to transition the way that we do business. So if you want to play that, Dan, that'd be great.
Can you see the video there on your screen, Katie?
No.
I have the slide, but there's nothing there. Hang on, I might need to open this a different way.
Whoopsies, I don't know why the video would not be there. I could always share my screen if
Can you try that?
Let me try that. Let me do something super quick before I do that.
All right.
Because let me just make it bigger. I hope that the sound will come through okay. Apologies, I don't know why that wouldn't show up. That's really okay. Here, I'm about to share my screen. If you did you give me permission? Yes. How does that look? Can you see it?
I can see it now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now I have to make it look better, I think. Okay.
Climate change is the result of our take, make, waste economy. And until now.
Oops.
Climate change is a result of our take, make, waste economy. And until now, we've looked at solving climate change largely by switching to renewable energy. We're replacing fossil fuels with wind and solar power at speed all over the world. But the truth is that the energy transition will only solve half the climate problem. It's like we've been reading only half the book, like we've been watching only half the movie. So what completes the picture? Transforming how industry uses materials and how we manage land. That is, transitioning to a circular economy. It's more than energy. It's about transformation. What does that mean? It means we address things before they become a problem and design out emissions before production even begins. We build an economy that eliminates waste and pollution, keeps products and materials in use, and regenerates natural systems. The circular economy can help address climate change by reducing emissions from industry, land use, and agriculture. So how do we make this transition? By businesses embedding the circular economy in their climate strategies and redesigning products and services. By governments setting enabling policies and putting the necessary infrastructure in place. By investors mobilizing capital towards circular economy solutions.
The circular economy plays a really key role in solving many of the problems around climate change. But what it also does is it builds a more resilient economy.
A complete picture of a thriving, zero emissions economy is coming into focus. The mission now is to make it a reality.
Awesome. So I'm going to give it back to you, Dan, to control the slideshow. So I can go on, because if I'm showing it, I can't see my notes. And then we'll go to the next slide. Got it. Awesome. Circular economy. Awesome. So that video is a really great way to show how that transition can happen from a linear to a circular economy. And it's going to make life better for everyone, right? A thriving economy based on the circular principles is better for the planet, it's better for people, and it's actually, frankly, better for our economy and better for businesses. It's based on eliminating waste, eliminating pollution, continuing to use our resources, being much more efficient. It's a much more efficient way of doing business. So here's a picture of the circular economy. You can see, rather than being linear, it is this beautiful circle where we're looking at reducing and refusing things we don't need, reforming, reusing, repairing, recycling. There's always going to be a little bit of waste. Only nature has figured out ways to make things that are 100% circular, but reducing that waste coming out of the system as much as possible. Right now, our economy is only 9% circular. So 92.8 billion tons of resources are used to run our current economy. 9% is circular, and we got to figure out how to increase that. We can't keep going on the way we are. Next slide. So the video gave 3 great tips on how you can invest in circularity. One is to support businesses that design products with circularity in mind. We're going to talk a lot during this workshop about ways that you can do that. So that's buying products that are circular. The second way is policies at the ballot box, electing people, electing representatives, supporting policies, legislation that supports the circular economy. Okay, not continuing to invest in the linear extraction model. And the third way is through our investments. Okay, mobilizing capital for companies to support the circular economy and stopping investing our money with companies that are destroying our planet. I believe that is it for me, and I'm going to hand it over to Diane. And if you want, there's a couple more videos, but Dan, if they're not working, I can also show them on my screen.
I think it might have been because I downloaded it into PowerPoint, so I just popped it up in Google. We should be okay now.
Oh, okay, great. It's all you, Diane.
Mute. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
You're awesome. You're great.
Okay, all right. I was talking away. This first video is I was going to do the plastic one first. Okay, it's the problem with plastic. And that's a huge, huge, huge issue with us because a lot of the plastic cannot be plastic is not just plastic. It can't be recycled. And we have so much single use. It's really weird that we get a product that cannot biodegrade, that's here forever, and we use it one time. It's just amazing that we would even consider doing that. So the problem with plastic is a major issue with the world right now. I think we all know that and know about the plastic in the ocean, plastic washing up. It just doesn't biodegrade. So here's a video that will explain this with some of the solutions that it's a short one, but it's giving you a couple of solutions that they're trying to come up with, where plastic is no longer considered a waste. It's considered a viable product that can be reused and reused and reused. So if you can show this.
Dan, I think your computer's on mute. Still can't hear it.
Okay.
Are you muted within Zoom? It might be that your Zoom window is muted.
How can we solve the global plastics waste crisis? Jonathan Gibson met the World Plastics Council, who believe that changing the way we view plastic and developing robust waste management infrastructures are key to a sustainable global solution.
These are the images that have shocked the world, the plastic waste that is polluting our oceans. In our homes, in the environment, even wrapped around our lunch, plastic products are everywhere. But the fact that plastic waste is ending up as pollution in our environment is now a global problem. The reality is we've become reliant on plastic, with its very low carbon footprint and ability to improve daily life, such as reducing food waste by keeping food fresher for longer.
We need to change our relationship with plastic. I mean, in short, we need to design particularly those single-use plastics so that the material, the carbon, can move around in a more circular way, so that rather than accumulating as waste, the end-of-life plastic could become new plastic items, ideally in a closed loop.
In cities like London, recycling might be part of everyday life, but are we doing enough?
I think it's making everyone accountable for their own actions. We have the opportunity to go, right, let's cut down on plastics.
But this city is also home to global perspectives. Is there as much public concern in Brazil as there is now here in the UK about plastic pollution?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Why is that?
We have bigger issues right now.
And I think it's cultural.
Yeah.
Our culture don't pay attention in nature or environment.
This stark difference in opinion makes finding a consensus much more difficult. So tackling this global problem relies on changing consumer behaviour and managing plastic waste.
We believe plastic is way too valuable to throw into the sea. It shouldn't be there. It's way too valuable to bury in the ground in a landfill, because that makes no sense whatsoever. In a circular economy, there is no such thing as waste. All waste is a raw material for some other activity. And that's more a mindset than it is anything to do with technology or innovation. Innovation can help, but we have to start with the premise that we all believe that that product which we are thinking of today as waste can actually be a feedstock, can actually be a raw material for another useful item.
Robert Kaplan is putting that thinking into practice. He's the founder of Circulate Capital, an investment fund that works in countries that lack waste management infrastructure to make today's plastic waste tomorrow's plastic profit.
Most of the plastic that flows into the ocean comes from China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, as well as India. Today, their waste and recycling systems look a lot different than how we might imagine it from the West. It often starts with a waste picker, an individual who collects waste on their own and sells it to an aggregation point. The challenge and what's getting into the ocean is the stuff that doesn't have value. So we're looking to invest in the future of waste and recycling entrepreneurs and businesses, as well as public infrastructure. So creating new end markets for these plastics that currently are wasted, that allow waste pickers and aggregators and processors to make money by managing this waste.
That starts by recognizing that different types of plastic require different types of solutions.
One of the things when it comes to recyclability is people think of plastics as being just one material, but they're really a wide variety of different materials. And therefore, we have to understand what the end-of-life solutions are for all of them and not just cherry pick one or two materials. With plastics, up to now, we have typically recycled them in a way that's called mechanical recycling. So what that does is it takes the plastic material and you grind it up, and then you make something new out of it. Chemical recycling allows us to create building blocks from these materials that can be used for all sorts of things.
At Edmonton in Alberta, the plastic waste produced by 1 million people is now being chemically recycled.
We bring it into a gasifier, as we call it, heat it up to 700 degrees C, convert it into syngas, which is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. We need to clean that gas, and then in the methanol reactor, we react the carbon monoxide with the hydrogen to methanol. And actually from methanol, it's only 2 more steps and you're into a polymer product again. So it's a nice example, I think, of what was nowadays called the circular economy.
Innovation drove the plastics revolution and will help to solve the plastics waste problem. But dealing with this global challenge also requires investment in waste collection, a change to the way we view plastic, and an end to the throwaway society.
Plastic is not waste. Plastic stays as plastic until it becomes another object. That's when we have achieved circularity, to make sure that there is no plastic waste in the future.
Okay. We will delve into that a little bit more. Why don't we watch the next movie thing on e-waste.
How can we solve?
And it's fascinating to me. I going into the factory and seeing the real problem.
These are old printers, computers, and phones, and this machine's shredding them to be recycled. Only about 17% of all electronic waste ends up like this.
It's very hard to recycle electronics. They're not designed to be recycled.
There are hundreds of tiny
I'm seeing the wrong screen.
From toxic materials to plastic to gold. And they
I hear the right thing.
Yeah.
Seeing it. Dan's on it.
Yeah. This is really interesting too, I think. Highlights the vast problem of e-waste.
That's it.
There.
These are old printers, computers, and phones, and this machine's shredding them to be recycled. Only about 17% of all electronic waste ends up like this.
It's very hard to recycle electronics. They're not designed to be recycled.
There are hundreds of tiny pieces hidden in every device, from toxic materials to plastic to gold, and they each have to be separated and recycled individually. Such precision takes lots of people, space, and heavy-duty machines, with a good deal of feminine power.
Sally is our big shredder. Heidi is German. Ginger's our metal finder.
Female dominant machines.
Of course, yes.
And if everything goes right, there's lots of money to be made.
We'll pull off the pieces which will be of value.
That's Ingrid, president of Sims Lifecycle Services, one of the largest e-recyclers in the US. Ingrid took us through her biggest facility, to see how it's repurposing or recycling up to 6 million pounds of old electronics every month.
So we're in Laverne, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. This is a 200,000 square foot facility where we focus on receiving, processing electronics.
Sims mainly gets electronic waste from office gear, like laptops, computers, printers, or phones.
We have Fortune 500 companies like HP and Lexmark, insurance companies, banks.
The rest of its clients are secret, but Ingrid can tell us what happens to these devices once they get here.
Reuse, repurpose, re-engineer if we can't reuse it. Very last resort is recycling. What you see here is where we first get the material in. It's a FIFO type of process, first in, first out. That's how we work it. Here she's offloading a truck. So she'll go in, get her forks into the pallet and pull it out. It's supposed to come from an office refresh. It looks like there's some old DVD players, some old stereo equipment.
The first stop, the scale.
Then they will get the weight and input it into our data center. And that's what Drew is doing over there with the computer. Then it gets tagged with a barcode. It'll tell us whether we go to destroy, recycle, or we go to reuse.
The building's broken up into recycling on the right and reuse on the left.
I think that's all we're going to show of this, right?
Yeah, I think more or less. There's a breaking point.
So
coming
yeah,
up.
so that's bringing to the surface the enormity of the problem. So every year when a new iPhone comes out, iPhone 10, iPhone 12, iPhone 14, all those, they're not made to be fixed to use again. I mean, you can't upgrade them. And that's the way it is with TV sets and smart TVs. So all of this electronics is enormous now, and it just grows and grows and grows. And it's just been where people are getting it and pulling out the valuable stuff, and then the rest is just trash. So the companies like this are trying to look into ways to salvage, take apart the computer screen you're looking at right now and getting the glass off of it, the plastic off of it, all the parts. So it's a very big, huge problem that we're facing, e-waste is, and with technology changing. So I think this was a real good overview of that. And I think it opens your eyes to what we're facing with redoing with all this technology. I believe now we're going to jump into how all of our stuff and all of this waste and everything that we're doing and sending overseas and everywhere else, how it's affecting environmental and climate justice. So Linda, can you tell us a little bit about the beginnings of the climate justice movement? Linda, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just waiting for my face to pop up, but that's okay. I don't need to see it. So I'm going to introduce the topic of climate justice and tell you a little bit about what that is and how does climate justice connect with the stuff that we throw away. Where does it go? So for people who don't know what climate, or the other term that's used is environmental justice, is, it begins with the idea that marginalized communities are more greatly affected by climate change. So who are those marginalized people? They tend to be people who are poor. They tend to be people of color. They tend to be women, the elderly, people who live in coastal communities. Those are the people who are more disproportionately affected by the changes that we see. So how does this connect with the stuff that we throw away? Where does that stuff go? Diane is going to give some examples of that in a minute, but I just want to briefly tell you a little bit about the origins of this climate justice movement. In the 1970s, there was about 30,000 tons of toxic waste that was intentionally dumped on some highways in North Carolina. And people were concerned about that. They wanted to clean it up. And what they did to clean it up is they transported it to communities where there were primarily African-American people living. And so people were concerned about that decision of where they were bringing all this toxic waste, and protests arose. And that really was the beginning of the climate justice movement in this country. So Diane is going to talk a little bit more about other things related to, you know, where our stuff goes, and more current and contemporary things that are happening now that we should be aware of, and how our stuff is, you know, disposed of and where it gets disposed. So next slide, Diane.
Yeah. So we tend to think out of sight, out of mind, but everyone loses with that. When we throw our stuff away, we go throw our plastic away, it doesn't really go away. And so developing countries are really bearing the undue burden for disposal of our stuff. For one, they're showing here that there's no infrastructure for them to handle waste right now. There's got to be, it says simply put, 2 billion people on Earth don't have access to waste management. And since this is a global issue, that waste goes into the oceans, that waste gets burned, are buried there. And so the infrastructure problem in developing countries, and that's where we send a lot of stuff. A lot of countries are sending stuff to developing countries to be dismantled or to be dealt with. And as you can see in the bottom picture, there's no way to deal with it. So that issue, when we think out of sight, out of mind, and we're shipping things off to other places, the United States doesn't do that as much as other countries shipping it to developing countries, but it does happen. They can't even handle their own waste. So this is a tremendous problem in the world about where all of this plastic is going. And those countries there, they don't even produce the plastic. Everything comes to them in plastic. And so the plastic arrives there. They're not producing it. It arrives there in the packaging of the goods they're using, and bottles and everything, and straws and everything else for one-time use. And there you see the result. Okay, the next slide. The phenomenon of, we just picked out a few things, there's just hundreds, but the phenomenon of fast fashion or throwaway fashion is a mindset that's prevalent. And throwaway fashion is really affecting our workforce and our environment, because people have no value in the clothing. It's cheap. It's made very cheaply. And so this year, this next year, a new fashion will come out and everybody runs and gets it and throws away the old fashion, or it doesn't hold up. So the garment industry and the way that the consumers don't value the things they're buying because they're so cheap, the clothing is causing a big issue. When we throw this, most of it is not recycled. It says that, you know, over 80% of it does not get recycled. It gets thrown away. It starts, I remember buying a pair of socks for my grandchild because we didn't, I forgot to pack them. And before we even used it one time, it was already raveling. She was walking and I could see the string all the way past her shoes. I was going, God, we've only put on these socks for 10 minutes and they're already coming apart. So CBS Mornings did a report. You can see that sweatshop down there. They called it a sweatshop. This was just in October. They did this report, and this is in Los Angeles. These sweatshops, they're skirting the issue of minimum wage by paying people by the piece. Like they get a nickel for sewing a sleeve on. It passes down a linear thing where somebody sews a sleeve, somebody else puts a collar, and they get paid a nickel or a dime for each one they do. And so they're lucky to get $5 an hour out of it. And the working conditions are very, very bad. And it's to meet the demand for this fast fashion. And so that's a real issue, and it needs to be, CBS was doing that report saying it needs to be governed. You don't even know that this is still going on in the way it is, the way people are being paid to produce this. So that's a mindset, fast fashion, throwaway fashion, that I thought was interesting to look at. The next slide. And then fence lines communities. I know this personally because that picture at the top up there, that's my neighborhood I grew up in. That is my neighborhood. I recognize the whole thing. I grew up on the Ship Channel in Houston, down kind of where Susan Wilson came from too. But the Ship Channel, it produced toxic toxic gases. I don't know how we're still alive. We had a reunion this last year with the people on my block, and we're all in our 70s. We said, how did we even live through this? But it smelled so bad. Our town was called Pasadena, and they called it Stinkadena. And the tragic part of it is that the people in these communities, they're not aware of the toxicity of what's around them for the most part. It's not on the forefront of their awareness. We were told, they had bumper stickers in our town that it said, "Smells like money to me." So isn't that horrible? So that smell, they were saying, smells like money because of the paper plant and all the fertilizer plants and all that stuff going on. So the people on the margins don't even realize the state they're in for the most part, and taken advantage of. You can see, so those are fence line communities, and they're still very abundant. In Hartford, I believe Sabina's going to talk a little bit about that. But I think this issue of putting waste treatment plants or putting landfills in places where people live, and it's got to be addressed. So there's 3 social climate justice issues that we selected to let you know that this is alive and well here in the United States, and we need to be aware of it. So I guess we'll move on to Sabina.
Thank you. Well, it's amazing that we're in this exact same place that you've been describing, actually in our backyard. One of the garbage to incinerator, in other words, you bring your waste there and they incinerate it and they make energy there, is actually just down the street in Hartford, and it's closing. Unfortunately, it takes half of the total waste in Connecticut. The people that live around this community of this incinerator have been trying to close it for 10 years. And it's finally closing because it's just too inefficient to modernize. And so they're closing it in July. They may make some alterations in the day that it's closed, but right now in 5 months it's to close. And the problem is that it's our waste, and it's going to be shipped to another fence line community in Pennsylvania, Ohio, or Louisiana. So this will be extremely expensive to transport to those states. And also it doesn't kind of get rid of the problem because it goes into another community that is fence line and up front. Next slide. Just to be very clear and physical about what we're talking about here in Connecticut, there was a study done in 2015, which is not that long ago, and I think it's pretty consistent with what's happening now. Each of those little guys there is one of us, and we create 1,370 pounds of trash each every year. And those 3 bags of pictures of bags combined is one of our garbage. Next slide. And don't be intimidated by this slide. I will very clearly explain what this pie chart is. This is actually our waste here in Connecticut. And if you were to take one of those same black bags and open it up and throw the content on the ground, what you would see is a lot of material that doesn't belong there. So starting in the top left, the top of the screen, and slightly to the right, you see paper. Well, that's the paper we should be recycling. And clockwise down, plastic, metal, glass, that's all the resources that we are to be recycling, not putting in our waste. And then you go around 6 degrees and 7 degrees, you see all the food waste and organics. Again, things that don't belong in our waste stream. Next slide, please. So this is just another way of looking at that same garbage bag that you've spewed all the contents down on the ground and you're looking at it. 2/3, all the blue, 2/3 of all that garbage is not supposed to be in the garbage. So in other words, we really actually have a lot less waste. Next slide, please. And so I think I've pointed out in those slides 4 areas that I would like everyone to just be very aware of. 1, e-waste. Well, it was only 0.5% of all the garbage on the ground when we spewed open our bag, but it is extremely toxic to burn that. And that's what these waste plants do. They're creating waste by incinerating our garbage. So all those chemicals go in the air. So take one, A, B, or C, and make sure every single one of your electronics, printers, cell phones, computers are taken care of and not ever put in the waste. Number 2, listen, 40% of our bag of garbage is actually compost. Number 1, it really clogs up the incinerator. That's why they are falling apart. It's moist material. Number 2, it doesn't belong there. It's an actual resource that can either be made into soil and or put at the anaerobic digester and create a much better solution for that compost. Number 3, listen, let's all review again what is recyclable. Let's not wing it. We have to all go back to recycle CT, just look at it, spend, I don't know, 10 minutes, just reacquaint ourselves what's in and what's out. The problem is, if you put something in there and it's not recyclable, it's contaminating the materials that are recyclable and really deteriorating the ability for people to create businesses here in Connecticut that actually take all the recycles that are clean and identifiable as recyclable and putting them into another purpose. And we are creating a big mess if 1, we don't know what's recyclable, and 2, we don't clean the recyclables. This is the biggest factor to create contaminants that, you know, your cottage cheese that was in your container kind of goes over 5 or 6 other things in the bag, and then 5 or 6 things are not recyclable. So we have to clean our items. And then number 4, interestingly enough, the bottle bill passed last year to increase the from 5 cents to 10 cents. And the reason why this was important is that they really don't want us to put recyclables into our our 10-cent bottles into the recycle bin. And of course, not into the waste bin. And the reason why this is important is that's already pre-sorted. They can already make a lot more money than if you put it into recycles and perhaps it gets contaminated. So those are the things that we can do today. And the next screen, the other way around. Yeah. Because we are in such a crisis, we have a lot of good thinking going on in the state. Number 1, unit-based pricing. That would be maybe on a state level, maybe on a municipal level, but everyone garbage is weighed. And of course, that's a lot less costly to pay for your garbage collection if you have much less garbage because you've composted, you've taken your other items out of your garbage. So that is coming, but there's a lot of pushback. People really are a little bit lazy right now in doing this and are calling it a tax and so forth. So we have to push that in the legislature. Curbside compost is a big issue right now that possibly could go statewide or at least municipal wide. where they make that a service. Besides just garbage, besides just compost, they would also have, I mean, besides just recycle, they would also have compost. And lastly, extended producer responsibility. We're all used to the mattresses now and the cans of paint. Well, there are a lot more items that potentially could get recycled if we force the producers to take back and be responsible for recycling the products or the packaging of those products. So I've gone through it very quickly, but you can have all these slides, and we're going to go now to our commitments page. And within all of the different things we've learned, I think we all can make a commitment that really makes sense for our life after especially learning about the story of stuff. Diane?
Yes. Can we go to the next slide then, the commitments? Yeah. So we have a nice display that whenever we get back to the church is right there going to Fisk Hall there, where we're doing these monthly programs, and we're actually putting up the commitments that you make there. We're posting them so that each month we'll have commitments from everybody so that we can hopefully move forward. So next slide. Okay, this will be Ed. Ed's going to do commitment number 1 and explain how a couple commitments you could make. Oh, and we would like you to be putting your commitments. If you see something you would like to commit to yourself, drop it in the chat. So if you would like to buy in bulk here, drop it in the chat as Ed talks. Okay.
Great, thanks, Diane. Next slide, please. So I'd like to give you some very specific, concrete examples of how you can start to live more as part of nature, and it all centers around rejecting plastics in any form that you can. And there's lots of ways you can do it. Whenever you go to the grocery store, you are faced with lots of opportunities to reject plastics. For example, at the Whole Foods, you can find the bulk food section where rather than buying, your rice or your oatmeal in plastic bags, you can get it right out of the bulk containers, and you bring your own paper bags or your own reusable plastic bags, and there you go. You've chosen not to buy the plastic packaging that otherwise you would get on the shelf. Next slide, please. Tons of opportunities to reject plastic bags. In the upper right, I've shown a picture of common produce that we all buy in bags. Apples, oranges, potatoes, onions, those all come in plastic bags. It's just so convenient to just pick them up in the bag and put it right into your cart. But you're not only buying the produce, you're buying the plastic bag. Well, reject that. Bring a string bag. Go over and fill your bag with the produce individually, and you're not buying plastic along with your produce. On the left side, you can see, it's just so easy. You've got the plastic mesh bag. Well, don't buy the plastic. Or on the bottom left, when we buy mushrooms, you're buying the plastic container, even though it's recycled, still, you're buying that plastic or the plastic wrap. Instead, lower right, bring your string bag and just take, the individual mushrooms, buy them that way. Next slide, please. Upper left, instead of buying a plastic bag of cane sugar, well, just buy a paper bag with a granulated sugar. Upper right, instead of buying a plastic container of laundry detergent, you can now purchase these detergent strips that are mailed to you in cardboard containers. The strips go right into your laundry, they dissolve, and there's no plastic involved at all. At the bottom of the screen, rather than, and by the way, a lot of this plastic that I'm showing is from Whole Foods. It's organic, but still, you're faced with a lot of plastic in that store. Instead of buying a plastic bag with spaghetti, We'll go over to Stop and Shop and you can find, a cardboard box of spaghetti. Reject plastic. Next slide, please. Okay, lots of consumer choices. Never ever buy a bottled water. There's just, that it can be avoided. Get yourself an Algae water bottle. It is plastic, but they're indestructible and they'll last for years and years. Carry your own water. Don't buy water. If you're going to a coffee shop or a tea shop, bring a travel mug. Most of these places that I know of now will happily fill it up for you. So you're avoiding the paper container and the plastic lid. And when you go to pick up takeout food, ask if they've included plastic spoons and knives and forks. Have they included, condiments like soy sauce and so on? If you don't need them, and you shouldn't, if you're bringing it home, then ask them please to take them out of the bag so that you're, again, rejecting plastic. So many ways we can do it. You've got to be mindful and you've got to really, make a commitment. I'm going to be more part of nature as opposed to apart from nature. Okay, I think I hand it off from here.
Okay, next slide. All right, this is the one I'm going to do. That you can commit to share items instead of buying more stuff. There's several ways this is happening. The first one, there's a lot of sharing tools like freecycle.com, Facebook Buy Nothing groups, and even Next Door Neighbor. People put that on all the time. Does anybody have I believe Katie the other day said she put on there, does anybody have a propane tank? Instead of going and buying one, people have them to just extra and they'll give them away. And then joint purchasing with family or friends. We were talking about this the other day, and my daughter and I just did it 2 days ago. My printer broke, and she has an old black and white printer. And I said, why don't we just buy one printer? She lives across the street, and I said, why don't we get a nice printer instead of 2 cheap ones? and we'll split the cost, and we'll do that because that way we can have a nice just one printer instead of buying more than you need. And it's going to be really nice. We can't wait for it to come in. So we just split it. So you can think of ways with, also the guy next door has a big tall ladder, and I was needing to get a ladder. He said, well, just if you'll let me use your dollies in your garage, I need to move some stuff. Why don't you just use my ladder? So we made that exchange last week, just talking to him. I said, I'm getting ready to go get a ladder. So you don't know, you can share things rather than going and buying new. Let's go to the next slide. I've got a picture. So the makers movement. I looked up Makerspace Connecticut in Hartford to see what they had there. They have them all over the country, and they're all different in different parts. There might be 4 or 5 in this area, and they're different. But what they are is shared workspaces for creativity. So the big tools and drill presses and kilns and industrial sewing machines. My friend down in Groton, she's going to one doing sewing. She's making some curtains for boats down there, and they have industrial sewing machines. So you can join those maker spaces, and that way you share equipment than having to buy all your own equipment. And plus you get together with other people up there to do that. They also have classes to teach you how to use it so people can make things and sell them. We started one before I moved here from Houston that the city was funding for people that were in marginalized communities or had low income, teaching them how to make stuff to sell. So they were being creative. And I think we all know, like places like Etsy and those kind of places are popping up everywhere on the internet where you can sell your stuff that you make. And so it's opening up a new thing where you can make stuff and not have to buy the equipment. Great way. And then shop down at the bottom, the community group or church swap events. These are easy to do, and they usually focus like puzzles. They're puzzle swap. You can have a community toy swap or a winter clothing swap, a book swap, and a seed swap, plant swap. And you just go and swap your stuff. You don't buy anything. And that way you're really focusing on saving, saving stuff and reusing it. So these swap events are actually quite fun and easy to do. So that's if you want to think about sharing things rather than buying new. Okay, the next slide and there.
All right, so I've got number 3. And again, folks, we encourage you to pop into the chat that if any of these commitments inspire you to make a change, just put something in chat. You can even just say number 1, number 2, number 3. We'd love to fill up that board when we all get back to church. So anyway, so number 3, I commit to supporting companies that operate sustainably. What does that mean? And how do I even know that? Well, you can take a look at their websites and you can see what kind of information that they put on there. Are they participating in the circular economy? Do they at least make a public statement about operating sustainably? Some companies you might see it listed as their ESG rating, and ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and that's kind of how business folks talk about sustainability and can track it. So before making especially really big purchases, make sure that they're eliminating as much waste as they can and that you're supporting them in those efforts. Buy local, buy small, buy from people you know, support your local farmers, local businesses. Keeping your dollars local reduces a lot of transportation costs and, as always, supporting our local economy rather than giving our money to Amazon is always a good thing. And then lastly, that green portfolio idea of, know where your investments are going and when you can, when it makes sense, invest in companies that are sustainable, that are operating in the sustainable circular economy, and divest from those who are polluting our planet and who are socially irresponsible and not treating the people who supply the goods and the services for their company. If they're not treating their people well, they're certainly not treating our planet well, and we shouldn't support them. So that is number 3, handing it off to, I think, the last commitment.
Oh, this is mine. This is your commitment to reduce your waste. And so number 1 there, it really should be everybody's highlight. Wash your recycling. Then learn what's in and out from the Recycle CT. Set up an area in your home where you just put electronics. You don't have to go every time to the transfer station to bring them back, but just put a little area in your house and take them once a year. And then take your bottles, your 10-cent, 5-cent bottles to the Redemption Center. And there is a wonderful webinar coming up on Tuesday by the Sierra Club. They do a great job and they're going to talk about recycling. I bet they're going to make it a lot of fun. So if you'd like to attend, that event will be in our Facebook page. That would be West Hartford UU Facebook. Next.
Yeah, that was Linda. Linda turned in her commitments here, and I thought it was kind of inspiring to see what her family's going to do. We put this slide in. So do we have time to look at it for a minute?
Yeah, I won't. Actually, I just have a very brief show and tell. I won't talk about all of them. People feel free to read them on your own, but I thought it's good to see things. So just here, I don't know, I'm not on the screen, I guess. Can Dan put me on the screen?
There you are.
Oh, okay. So yeah, if you can go back to the slide before this, Dan. Nope, before. Yeah, this one, right. So, I mean, again, people can read on their own, but I thought I'd show you an example of a mesh bag. Ed talked about this, putting your produce in this bag, this kind of bag when you go shopping. There also, and we'll put it in the resource, there is a podcast on what to do with plastic. And they did a study looking at plastic bags versus paper versus reusable bags versus cloth bags for grocery shopping. And the product that was best in terms of the energy that is involved with producing and waste was the plastic. I'm sorry, it was not the plastic. It was the reusable bag. So if you have a choice between using cloth, plastic, or paper, use this bag when you grocery shop. And I'm finished. So thank you. Next slide.
I think, yeah, and then the next slide, I believe, is going to talk about going to the next one. Yeah, the Sierra Club on Tuesday night.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and there it is. Go ahead.
Would you come to the next slide, please?
Next slide.
On February 24th, we are going to have a webinar on how to be a good climate advocate. And first you'll learn the bills, that just 2 or 3 bills that really have a chance of making it through the legislature, but need your push. And then we're going to learn how to do that push. And third, we're going to be presented with 2 social justice and climate justice programs that we would like to encourage many congregations to participate in. One is going to be to provide electric school buses to the low and moderate income towns. And the second one is going to be on energy efficiency and making sure that we get the money that's been released, $14 million, into those homes for low and moderate income people and get those houses energy efficient. And that will reduce their costs and also reduce greenhouse gases. So hope to see you there.
Diane, are you going to just wrap up?
Oh yeah, I was looking at the in the chat there about the fecal matter and stuff. I'm always wondering that too. I have bags of it that you pick up in the yard. I was kind of wondering what you did with that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I just threw in an answer I've seen. I could do research and put it in our resources, but I don't use one because we do the same thing that everybody else does with the plastic bags. But I have seen things that you can bury in the ground, and it's like a little garbage can, almost like our worm composting bin. But that it prevents it, it buries it enough so that it doesn't, run off waste into the watershed, and that it gets digested. And compostable bags, but I know, I just think about the poor, like all the dog poop that goes into the trash to energy plant.
Me too, and goes into the dump. I hesitate throwing it in there all the time, but I have.
Excellent question, something we should research.
look into. So anyway, well, this concludes our program on the story of stuff. And as you can see, it's a very interesting and wide program. Here's some resources here. Are these resources something that we can email out to the attendants, or do you just come back and look at them, or what?
We can figure it out. If people are interested in it, they can email GS at West Hartford UU. This is a work in progress. This resource slide is not done, and eventually will be posted with this presentation. But feel free to reach out to any of us as well.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you very much for attending, and hope that this has opened your eyes to some of the problems that we're having with our stuff, and how we really need to look into it more. Anybody else have any comments? I think we're out of time.
We're out of time. If people wanted to stay on and ask a few questions, I'm happy. I think we could stay on. I know we're over by about 11 minutes or so, but then we'll wrap up the formal presentation.